well. So we've got everything covered. So
You're worldwide.
we're going global with this thing.
Nice.
So Maressa, April, welcome to Virtual Warwicks.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, it's going to be so I'm so glad you're both here. It's going to be such an interesting conversation. I was just like, oh, I can't wait for this one. And when we were in the green room, we were talking about Maressa's next book, and I'm sure you all will talk about that, but can't wait for that one either. So it's going to be super good. So just before I introduce these two lovely women, let me give anybody who's here that's watching us that hasn't been to one of these before a little bit about who we are and where we're at. Warwicks, we're located in San Diego, La Jolla. April, you are in San Diego as well, correct?
And Freeway close. I know Warwick's well.
I love it.
Yeah.
And Maressa, where are you joining us from tonight?
Los Angeles.
You're in LA. So we've got the West Coast, Southern California covered. So not sure if anybody is joining us from any other parts of the country, but let us know where you're calling in from so that we can just give you a shout out there. So in the chat, both in the webinar chat and in the Facebook chat, I am going to put how to order Maressa's book. So you can easily order that so if you're in San Diego, we'd love you to come by the store, but we will ship this wherever you're located. If you're on Facebook, in the comment section, if you have a question, go ahead and pop a question in there. Maressa and April are going to talk for about 30 minutes, and then I'll pop back in with any audience questions. If you're here in the webinar with us, go ahead, and if you scroll down, you'll see a Q&A button. Go ahead and put your questions in there, and we'll bring those to you as well. So I think that's it for my housekeeping. So I'm going to introduce these two lovely ladies and get off the screen so they can start chatting about the book here, which is what we're really here to talk about. So Maressa Brown is a Los Angeles-based journalist and astrologer who has written parenting, astrology, pop culture, and general lifestyle content for nearly 2 decades. You do not look old enough to have been writing this for 2 decades.
Aw, thanks.
She's a regular contributor to Parents Magazine, resident astrologer for In Style and Shape, and senior editor for care.com. Her writing has also appeared in the Washington Post and on What to Expect Digital, popsugar.com, horoscope.com, astrology.com, and more. A graduate of Emerson College, Maressa is a member of the International Society for Astrological Research, the Authors Guild, and the American Society of Journalists and Authors. And as I said, she's here today to talk about her new book, Raising Baby by the Stars. And joining her is April Elliott Kent. April has been a professional astrologer since 1990. Again, not too young to be this.
Bless you.
I swear, y'all are looking great out there. She's the author of Astrological Transits, The Essential Guide to Practical Astrology, and Star Guide to Weddings. April's astrological writing has also appeared in Llewellyn's Moon Sign, Sun Sign, and Sabbat's Almanac books, The Mountain Astrologer, and Dell Horoscope magazines, and online at BeliefNet and Tarot.com. A graduate of San Diego State University, yes, a fellow Aztec here as well.
Go Aztecs.
Go Aztecs. April is a member of the International Society for Astrological Research as well, and the Authors Guild as well. And like we said, she lives here in San Diego with her husband and 2 cats. So with that, ladies, have a great conversation. We'll see you in a little bit.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Oh, my friend, what a delight to talk with you about your beautiful, spectacular book. And it was so fun to sort of be talking to you every step of the way while you were going through the process and really sharing the highs and lows of writing that first book. I would love it if you would tell us about we've heard about your background in writing, but what about your background in astrology? And you say you yourself were a baby raised by the stars.
Yes, absolutely. So that's correct. I feel like perhaps in some way I was always meant to write this book as a baby raised by the stars.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like very much a part of my astrologer origin story that really from the time I can remember, my parents were talking about astrology in the house. It was very much a household language, My father, and I tell this story in the book, in 1969 was in between his undergrad and his master's, and he was with a buddy and they were on a road trip. And this is a very late 60s kind of story. It was 1969, and they stumbled on a hippie commune where people were talking astrology and teaching one another. And my father that was his first big exposure, I guess, to it. And he having a Pisces moon and
Mhm.
yeah, Cancer Mercury, and also his Leo sun, like you, he was very intrigued and wanted to learn more and began to teach himself astrology, learned all about his own chart, went back to his hometown outside of Chicago, Illinois, when he was done with his master's, ran into a family friend and said, "Hey, happen to know any Pisces women you could introduce me to?"
Oh my gosh, did he?
Yep. And she said, "Oh, yes, my best friend happens to be a Pisces. I'll introduce you. Her name's Irene." And they've been married almost 50 years.
That's a real When Harry Met Sally story when they were interviewing the married couples. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, and the first time they hung out, supposedly my father did my mom's chart. So it's very much a part of how they met, and then, how they went about parenting us three kids. I'm the eldest of three. And at least for the first couple of us, they say they were kind of trying for Leos. They really missed it with my brother because he's full on Scorpio.
Oh yeah,
Stellium
they took
plus,
a left
plus,
turn
plus.
somewhere there. Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask you if they had in mind, because so many people do when they know some astrology and they're looking to have a family. And I'm sure a lot of them are thinking, how can we time it so we can avoid the signs we don't love and go for the ones we feel very comfortable with? But so they
Right,
were
right,
trying,
right.
but they didn't quite, they came close with you.
Well, they got about 50% of what they wanted
Yeah.
with me. my half of my personal placements are in Leo, hence
Mhm.
the lion earrings that I
Yeah.
wore today, and the big hair.
Mhm.
And I also talk in the book about like how I feel like my Leo parts of me are really a lot of what drove my passion for this topic, which is because Leos were really like comfortable with self-image and self-confidence and self-empowerment and self-awareness, and this is that all of those things are, a goal of this book for people to really tap into all of that,
Oh,
to be
interesting.
more effective and comfortable and happy in family life, and connecting with their little one.
Mhm.
So I grew up with my parents teaching me about astrology. And yeah, to come back around to your question, I was writing about it and talking about it, and I have friends from elementary school who will come talk to me today and say like, "I remember like sitting in 5th grade with you and you were talking about astrology."
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very
And
natural for you. I ran across a little notebook I had of all the kids I went to high school with, and I had noted, their placements from like heaven knows what, the Grant Louis book, and just Venus and Capricorn or whatever it was. So I still have that little book somewhere. I've got intel on you people from high school. But
that's awesome.
were you thinking just generally of it's time for me to pitch a book? Because you had written for so many magazines. To this day, if somebody Googles a particular topic in astrology, yours is going to be one of the first bylines that comes up, is what I found. So you have a really deep background. There was a lot of different things that you could have written about. And how did you settle on baby?
I had very much like made up my mind after moving out to LA in 2017. I had kind of some big life stuff, shakeups that kind of had me starting a new chapter personally and professionally. And I had set an intention of like, okay, I really want to get serious about getting a book published, because being a published author was something I had dreamed about. Not only had been sort of like a natural astrologer in training since I was a kid, but at 5, I said to my dad, "If I write books, do you think people would read them?"
Oh, little Maressa.
That was my Virgo.
Yes. Please, may I? Oh, it's so cute.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the
And
Leo said, sure they will. All those
exactly.
Leo
So
planets.
kept pushing ahead. And
Right.
then yeah, I decided I'm going to manifest this. And I kind of, you can't just say I want this when you're manifesting. That's part of it, but then you got to kind of do some work, put your nose to the grindstone, do the Saturn stuff, right?
Yeah, right.
And show that you mean business. And so I got to work on a book proposal, which was for a totally different, I mean, it was astrology, but it was a different topic. But it was good practice for me to write a nonfiction book proposal and just put it out there in the world that I am willing to do the work, and I have a lot of ideas, and I have a lot of energy and enthusiasm to do this, to write a book and become a published author, as I've always dreamed about becoming. And I worked with a consultant on that to sort of finesse that proposal, but I wasn't fully in love with it. And you and I had a conversation about not being fully in love with a book idea. You had said,
Don't do it.
Don't do it, because this is your baby. You're gonna gestate, and then even beyond it coming into the world, you're gonna be carrying this throughout your life. You really, have to really feel like you're behind the idea and that you're passionate about it. So I think just sort of putting all of that out there really did help, and all the hard work that you mentioned, all the clips and writing about parenting and writing about astrology led to my editor on this book approaching me and saying, hey, we would love to do a parenting astrology book at Artisan.
Perfect.
And we think that you're the person to do it based on Google.
Oh, right. I didn't remember that part of the story. So it was an idea whose time had come, and you just stepped into the picture. Oh, well, were you excited about it right away? Because you don't have children, spoiler alert, yet. But did you feel at any point like, wow, who am I to write this book about parenting?
I mean, I did. That's been an ongoing sort of little imposter syndrome battle I've had in my career, because I've been a parenting journalist for many years, as Julie mentioned. And I've come up against some pushback at times from people along the way who are kind of like, how can you cover this subject when you're not doing it yourself? And I'm like, well, I'm a journalist, and you don't have to be an astronaut to cover space, and you don't have to be a doctor to cover medicine, etc. And I talked to my therapist about it as well, actually, when I was having some imposter syndrome feelings. And she was like, listen, parents themselves are only parenting their kid. They only know their kid. They don't know all kids. Right.
Smart therapist. And what good advice.
Like, astrology, and they don't. So necessarily.
This is very much the point. And speaking of the knowledge of astrology and the fact that, well, you didn't really know about being a parent, you wrote the book. How much astrology does someone need to be worried about knowing to really get into your book and use it and find it helpful?
I really came at it wanting anybody, no matter how much might not even know your sun sign. Maybe you're not quite sure because you were born on a day that the sun moved signs and you've never done your chart. But even if that's where you're at, or you're more advanced and really are familiar with your chart, even have looked at your child's chart, I wanted this to really cast a wide net and appeal to all of those people. I take a lot of pride in the fact that a great deal of the first part of the book is really like some hand-holding through basic natal astrology. What does it mean? What does your sun sign mean? What does it mean when a planet is in a sign? How does the Western zodiac, tropical zodiac work? We talked about the best way to approach that, because April was my technical editor for those of you who don't know that. Yeah. And so we talked about, let's make this really accessible, because that was really at the core of, kind of I alluded to before, but I want it to be a very useful, practical tool for parents' toolbox. Right. So I don't want to intimidate anybody with like, here's some crazy graphs and numbers and degrees and this and that, but like, the deep end. But if you're already at the deep end, then you can definitely get something out of it as well.
Absolutely. I got that from reading the book as well, that you can take from it what you're ready to take. And if what you're ready to take really is the sun's sign for the baby, your sun's sign, maybe your spouse's sun's sign, that's all still really helpful stuff.
Absolutely. And then if you're ready to go to the next level, like I say, like maybe check out their moon sign, read your moon sign and their moon sign, or in
Mhm.
certain sections, because we have the different sections in the book, like self-expression and then health and well-being. I encourage you to look at certain other placements that are really exceptionally applicable in those areas of life.
Yeah, really well done with that, by the
Thank
way.
you.
So that's
Thank
wonderful.
you.
And there are so many more resources now. And I think just generally astrology has had such a moment in the last few years, I think through the pandemic and so forth. A lot of people are a lot more savvy and a lot more knowledgeable about pretty basic astrological stuff, but some concepts that are a little more sophisticated. Mercury retrograde, a Saturn return, a new moon, a full moon, and knowing what those things mean. So it's great. They have a little bit more of a head start. And in this day and age, as opposed to when your dad was learning a little later, when I started to learn in my teens, you didn't have those resources. I remember writing to an author of a book to get a copy of my chart.
Yeah, mail away for it.
Yes, I mailed away for it. So now people have so many more options. They can go online for free. They can calculate their baby's chart. There are little things that say this symbol means this, and they're so much more empowered. So that's a really nice basis for them to walk into your book and get to know our wild and crazy astrology world a little bit more. Tell us.
Totally. And like, I actually, just to say that, like,
No, go
I
ahead.
encourage people to use those tools that they have, the apps that I suggest certain apps and websites, but I want it to be like where people are looking at something that they grabbed online or on their app, and then they go to the book and they can go back and forth and be like, oh, right. Oh yeah, my kid is that's their Mars. Oh, let me see how that works with mine or whatever.
And you wrote in a really positive and life affirming way, because I remember again starting out in the 70s when the only books that were available were a little bit pessimistic in tone, I might say. And how lovely for someone, they come to the subject of the most precious little human that they'll ever have in their life. And they're showing such vulnerability. And it's terrible to think of them coming to a book where things are really pessimistic or set them up to feel badly about their child's future. Did you find that some people who read the book or get into astrology generally are a little bit afraid that the more they know about their child's chart, they might manifest the more difficult aspects of it or something?
Yeah, I've had friends who are parents say to me, like, don't tell me anything. I don't want to know anything. Like, I want to get to know this child completely, sans any suggestion from anything. And I completely respect that. But what I'm saying with raising baby, of course, is astrology is not the only thing informing your child's personality, of course. It's just one thing of many on a beautiful, colorful palette, painter's palette of things that contribute to their overall self. And if, I mean, like, parenting is hard. I'm not one yet, but I sure know getting to parenthood is hard. And
we've been children. We know what it's like for our parents. Yeah,
exactly. And watching my friends, I know, there's a lot of challenging moments. And if just holding a little bit of your child's astrology in mind could make some of those moments a bit easier and more harmonious for you and for them, and bolster your connection as you work on nurturing that to me is a gift. So I understand if you don't want that gift, that's fine.
But it's all in perspective, as you say. To me, it's like, I'm not a parent, but I've always kind of thought, well, if I were going to have a child and you have the option of knowing the gender and everything in advance, I'm like, of course, because I feel like I want to know the most I could possibly know going in.
You've got some Virgo in your chart.
Virgo. I want to be prepared and I want to have some tools. And that's what I think is so great about the way you approached the topic in the book. Again, it's like, hey, here's a way to get to know some possibilities for this little person and to help them feel comfortable about their essential nature, as well as you. So you're not trying to turn an Aries into a Pisces or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like, oh, that makes me think of a story that my dad brought up when we were talking about raising baby by the stars, how he did it. And perhaps, again, when you think about parenting, you think about your childhood. The two are inextricably linked.
Sure.
And for my dad, it like brought up this from memory he had of my grandpa, who was lovely, but he was an Aries. So Aries, they really have certain things that they like, that they find stimulating, and arguing is one of those things. Quite often, not every Aries. You got to look at the whole chart, of course, as I always say, as we always say. But for my papa, he found it fun to argue and debate. And my sensitive Pisces moon father did not. And so my grandpa was like, fight with me. And my dad was like, what about, like, as a little boy, like, no, Dad, I don't want to. So just a moment like that, like a little more understanding of, and I think of the same thing when I always think about like Queen Elizabeth and Prince Charles, and how sensitive he was as a child, and she was so Taurian, and
just opposite signs and kind of not getting one another a lot of the time. So yeah, the more tools, the better. Tell us a little bit about how the book is laid out and the format of it, and the kinds of tools and resources and so forth that are available.
Sure. So the front of the book, like I said, is very much about the basics of astrology. How I give you kind of just, even if you're not a parent, again, like I like to say, like can be really useful just for getting to know your own chart. Then I go through sign by sign and talk about like happy baby for Cancer, like for every sign, happy baby, cranky baby, and like happy toddler, cranky toddler. And again, that's sort of a more, I think, optimistic way of framing things. Like I'm not sugarcoating it. You're going to have your moments with every sign, kid. But maybe they're cranky for a certain reason. And here you can kind of set the stage for them to work through it a little bit faster or whatever.
Yeah, start here, drill here.
Yeah. Then we get into self-expression and learning and talk about all 12 signs through that lens as well. What are some books that they might really love? And how can you kind of make a nursery really welcoming and attuned to their needs based on their astrology? Health and well-being, that also encompasses like boundaries. We call it establishing boundaries. Initially, the conversation was like, oh, do we want to call it like discipline? There's that discipline might get a bad rap unnecessarily. That word, I think, it's a Saturnian word. It makes me think very much of Saturn.
Right. And this is a very pink book, as we were talking about before. So let's let Saturn have his place, but yeah, the language is important.
Well, we talk about, boundaries is another way of framing Saturn.
Yes.
We do talk about limitations and boundaries, and those don't have to be a bad thing at all. In fact, it's a loving thing that you can do for your child. So, another point, just to make, is that as I was writing the book, I very much incorporated sort of the philosophy and the lens of gentle parenting, which really creates space for a child to work through their emotions and be a whole human being, instead of a little mini me of a parent, or somebody who's not allowed to have big emotions. So the health and well-being has tools for that. And then the third part of the book is every sign parent's profile, and then pairings of every single sign parent with every sign child, which
that is so brilliant. Yeah, that's such the whole section of the book, because that just didn't have to be your child. Going back to everybody can use this book. This is anybody who you're dealing with, a sibling or a parent or another child. So helpful. Yeah, how does this sign go with this sign?
Right, and we have a sibling compatibility chart in the back, and also some parenting tools. I put on my journalist hat. I had to at one point, and talk to a couple of parenting experts to get some thoughts on. I broke it down by by the qualities, by cardinal, mutable, and fixed signs, and talked about kind of like what are just some tools for your toolbox based on those personality types.
Do you want to
So
say
that-
just a couple of words about each of those and what those temperaments are like?
Sure. So the cardinal signs are the initiators. They're the big picture visionary thinkers. And then the fixed signs are the more obstinate, resolute, you know, can dig their heels in, but they also get to the finish line because they are determined. And then mutable signs are most flexible, adaptable, but maybe not the most decisive.
Probably not. No. Which are you? Which one are you?
I'm a mutable fixed hybrid.
There you go. There you go. I know about that
Yeah.
digging in the heels and that kind of
Yep.
thing.
And I married a cardinal stellium to get some cardinal in the mix here.
That's fantastic, because you need to have somebody to get things going, and then you need the fixed sign person that'll keep it going, and then you need the mutable people to get it out there in the world. And yeah, it's wonderful. It's great. Did you find when you were writing the book that there were certain passages that were a little more challenging for you because they reflected things in your own chart?
Because, oh, what, could you repeat that, April? Well,
That there were things that you had to write that would have been a little more tricky because they reflect things in your own chart and you were afraid of not being
interesting.
objective?
Oh, that's very interesting, because I thought about it kind of differently. I thought it about like, well, this is the easy one for me because I know it back and forth. I don't know if that's delusional. or
Yeah.
what. I mean, you make a good point though, that yeah, you know, you lack a little bit of objectivity, but I tend to think that maybe it's the Virgo in piece that, you know, we are very self-critical at times
Oh,
and hard on ourselves. So like, I know the pros and cons of Virgo and Leo, my really dominant energies.
Right.
And I have a whole theory that I've been talking about. I think probably we've talked about it a bit, about like the unevolved, immature version of each sign, and then the more evolved, higher minded version of the sign. So like for Leo, that's, you think about when I was a little girl, when I was about 4 years old, and my dad had his camcorder out, and I was like, look, only me. And my brother, bye, like I pushed him off camera. And
What
now
sign
that's
is-
evolved.
what sign is your brother?
Oh, he's the super Scorpio.
Oh, well, so that was fine with him. Didn't want to.
Well,
Oh, maybe not so much. Okay, has some Leo planets in there somewhere. Okay. Yeah.
but then the evolved Leo is more like, oh, well, I feel comfortable in my skin and I'm confident and I want to empower others to feel that way.
Yes,
So-
I think that's true of Leo. Yeah, it's helping others shine.
Exactly.
And I think that might be the gift of each of the signs now that I think about it, because I'm always telling my Cancerian clients who are tired of taking care of everybody, I'm like, no, your job is to help them take care of themselves.
Yes, I love
Right.
that.
So
Totally.
I think with each
Mhm.
sign, we might see a little bit of that in there, I think.
That's right.
Mm.
Yeah. And so I guess I tried to hold all of that sort of in mind as I was writing. But yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's hard when you have your affinities towards certain, and I've noticed the other side of things too. I notice when a writer, an astrologer, clearly has some bone to pick with,
Yes.
or things to learn about a particular sign, and you're like, geez, what do you have vowed for me?
Yeah, what did I do to you in a past life? The Moon and Gemini get completely misunderstood almost at all times.
Yes,
Yeah, for sure.
So
Yeah. Did you find that the moon, because we know as astrologers that the moon is very sacred to women and mothers and motherhood and that. I'll bet that was a really interesting and exciting part of the book to explore.
oh yeah, I wish I could get into it more, you know, like, I mean, there could be a whole section on the moon, but what I tried to do, you know, I mean, it's already way too long. It was already like much longer than we thought it was going to be. So
Good
I
size.
just tried to really like keep bringing it up in the book when I had the opportunity to, you know, like, look at the moon. Wow, that's, you know, because that's how you want to be nurtured and how you nurture. And that is huge when you're moving through this book. And that's why I kind of tend to say, like, if you're a beginner and you only know your child's sun sign and your sun sign, if you want to dip your toe into the next level, I really encourage people, find out both of your moon signs and really try to move through the book and looking at that too.
Mhm. What do you think that tells us? Describe for people that aren't super familiar with astrology. What does the moon really tell you about the other person?
It tells you about their intuition. I like to say it's their emotional compass, their emotional core, their center, how they process emotions, and how they want to interact with others through emotion, I think.
Mhm.
It's so much, it's huge. I just saw a post on Instagram today from one of our colleagues talking about like how he really focuses on the moon more in readings with his clients than the sun
Mhm.
for that very reason.
I find it such a good tool for getting into talking to a client where they live, because it's where they feel safe and comfortable and
Inner
yeah.
life,
Yes.
your inner self.
Yeah, the
Like,
stuff that you don't even notice about yourself because you just take it for granted. That's just
yeah,
how the same with the sun. You just think everybody feels that way.
right.
So tell me about your general approach to astrology. We've talked about it a little bit, but what's the approach that you hope that people will come away with from reading the book? How do you want them to feel about themselves and their journey of parenthood from reading the book?
Empowered. I think I've used that word a few times
It's a good one. It's a
along the
good
way
one.
here. But I mean, that means the world to me, to help someone feel a bit more empowered and confident, centered, and capable. And because it's rough out there, and this country does not do much to support. In my capacity at CARE, we talk all the time about, parents do not have the support that they need in this country.
Mhm.
We don't have childcare that we need. There's Parents are dealt a rough hand from the get-go, from even before, even when you're pregnant. I mean, even when you're trying to conceive, where I'm at.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
it's a lot. So any little thing that can help make things a little bit smoother sailing, I think.
We do tend to be
Will
very
help.
judgmental towards parents, don't we? Everybody
That
think,
too.
yeah, everybody's a Monday morning quarterback and they think they could do it better and they have good opinions about how you should be doing it.
Exactly. And yeah, so and I'm so passionate, especially since doing my own self-work and therapy, about individuation and little ones, really, because I've learned some things about my own childhood that I wish could have been a little bit different. But again, back to the parents have it rough, just
Yeah.
how much were our parents not really set up for success. You got to take that into consideration. But still, like, there are certain things that I wish I had, even though my parents saw me as a Virgo Leo person and definitely held space for that. There are still things. And I just think, wow, if more parents were able to be like, wow, my little Cancer, I need to be kind of careful about how I put this criticism, because they're really going to take it to heart, and it's
Right.
going to be waterworks, and they're not going to let it go so easily.
Right.
Versus little Aries is going to be over it in 2 seconds,
Right.
just to be seen and as a individual person, it's just going to create such a wonderful foundation for the rest of their life.
Oh,
So
I
that
think
means the world.
I think it really comes across in the book that you've written. It's
Oh,
warm
thank you.
and it's inviting and it is supportive. And I think that, as you say, is really what parents could use a little more of.
Yes. Oh.
Well, unless there was something else that you really wanted to share that we haven't touched on.
Well, I guess we could talk just a little tiny bit about what's to come. I'm not able to say too much, unfortunately, at this point, but I do have a second book coming out next summer, summer 2024. I believe the published date isn't going to be in July, and it is a more
And
general
soon.
audience. It's not for
Mhm.
just parents. And although I will always say this is not just for parents either. It is called A New Parent's Guide to Astrology. But we, like you said, we've all been children. We all have relationships. This is a relationship book. And
We
it's
all have
this is
inner
for yourself.
children, so
Exactly. Getting to
Yeah.
know yourself and getting to know people who are near and dear to you and those dynamics. So
But
it's
we
for
have
everyone.
another one coming up that you can't say much about, but I know what it is. I can say everybody's going to be very excited by it because it's very useful for
Oh, thank
in
you.
everyday life. Back when you were a young kid and you wanted to be a writer when you grew up, did you ever dream your first book would be an astrology book?
I would, if you told me that at 10 years old, for instance, if you told me at 5, I wouldn't really know.
Yeah, it's like
I thought I was
what?
gonna write story books about princesses and stuff, but at
Sure.
5. But at 10, I was already like reading my horoscope to my friends on the playground and talking about everything that I knew about my sign and theirs and blah blah blah, right? As we were saying before.
Yes.
So if you had
Yes.
told little me, I guess I would not be surprised.
It all makes sense, and you've ended up just where you should be. Well, I think
Exactly.
that we are probably going to wrap it up and leave it at that. And there is our friend Julie.
We're back. That was a great conversation.
Oh,
Wonderful.
wonderful.
And we've got some questions coming in, but there are a couple things that I was just noticing when you talked about because you brought it up a couple times about imposter syndrome. And I don't know, do you read or do you follow Adam Grant at all?
Yes, I think I follow him.
Okay, so
on
he-
Instagram.
Yeah, so he's got a new book out called Hidden Potential. And so he actually says that imposter syndrome is a very empowering thing because it is you going outside your comfort zone and other
point.
people seeing in you something you don't see in yourself yet.
Ah,
Love that.
And
I love that.
I love that too, because it's like, it's true, because sometimes we all feel like, because when we don't know something and we're trying to learn, we kind of put it on, but it's like other people are putting on to us that it's, so I love that. 'cause
Oh, I
it's a
do
positive,
too.
it's kind of a positive spin on that imposter syndrome thing.
Yeah. Thank
If
you
look
for
into
sharing
someone's
that.
chart, you might see where that pops up, like for them, like
Yeah.
they're
Now, okay,
have
I just have a personal question because I have 2 little granddaughters who were born premature.
Mm.
So when
Okay.
so do you look at their sign of what their birth date was supposed to be or what their actual birth date was?
Their
Actual birth date?
actual birthday. Yep.
Okay.
Get
Yeah.
that question a lot.
I
It's,
bet, yeah. Because I bet that
yeah,
it's like something because like the gestation and all that,
see, when they come into the world, that's the moment,
I
Got
think
it.
that's their pact with time is the way that I've heard it said.
Yeah.
That's
what?
the moment for them. They're packed with time,
Oh,
their
okay.
agreement.
Interesting. Okay,
Nice.
so from
Ooh, I love
Facebook,
that paper. That's like chills.
I
Give me chills.
know. That's a really interesting way of looking at it too. Like I said, we could go on and on this.
Oh.
We have some Facebook, we got the webinar questions and we got Facebook questions coming in. So on Facebook,
Okay.
I'm going to bring one in real quick and then I'll get to the webinar ones. So Amanda came in a little bit later, so she may have missed it, but I don't think you covered this. She says, I'm curious if either of you believe that parents and children are karmically connected and if that is visible in the charts.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Okay,
if
both of you are like,
yeah, I think if you believe in that concept, it's hard to think of a relationship that would be more karmically significant. And what would you look to, Maressa, in a chart for finding those connections, maybe?
Oh, it's
between a
amazing
parent
when
and
you
child?
look at any parent child. Like I've been looking not just at myself and my parents, but like my aunt and my grandmother. I recently got my grandmother's birth time, and so I had been kind of playing around and like trying to make her chart for a while, and then my aunt was like, "Oh, I actually have her birth time." So then I was able to throw it together
Awesome.
on my software and look at, and there's all these just echoes, and you can see even through generations. You can look at a grandmother, a child, and then the grandchild, and you can see. And I like doing that with the royal family, which is why Prince George is actually the sample chart in my book, because it's so apparent in there about with the Taurus grandchildren in the royal family. they're little echoes of Queen Elizabeth, and you probably got Taurus going even further back in that family tree,
Mhm.
right?
So particular
Um,
signs and connections. I found often with parents and children, the lunar nodes in a chart, they look like little horseshoes. And if they're often connecting with Saturn or something else in the parent's chart at the time. So, but you see those patterns, as you say, in signs and the aspects between planets and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it's like a say you've got a Mars Uranus conjunction or something in a parent's chart.
Yeah.
Interestingly, a grandchild might be born when that happens again or something
Yeah,
like that.
for sure. And it
But
shows the particular quality of that karmic connection, if we want to look at it that way.
Oh, something
Yeah.
else to note that I was like came across recently that one of our astrologer colleagues had mentioned was that you got to also think about the fact that like when a child is born, those are transits for the parent or the
Right.
grandparent as well.
Yeah.
So if just to sort of define that quickly so it doesn't feel like it's going over people's heads if you're not quite sure what that, well, you're the transit queen. You wanted to define
Oh,
right?
well, I mean, it just means we take a look at the planets in the sky right now, where they are, and we compare it to a person's own birth chart.
Mm.
And we look for the connections between them. And of course, the transiting planets are moving all the time. The birth chart is what it is forever. So what Maressa was kind of pointing out was, for a parent, their birth chart is their birth chart forever. And here comes this little person who comes in a particular moment. We catch their planets in the sky at that moment, compare it to the parent's child. And it's just on any other day, it would have been a transit, just some of the planets be gone tomorrow to other things. But when it's a child, it's a moment fixed in time that really connects with the parent's chart in a really interesting way.
Yeah.
So
Super.
yeah, they're just
Yeah.
little transits to us,
I
little
love
Saturn transits.
I love that. And one of the things you went back, going back to what you were talking about right before I came back on, was looking at each child individually. And us as parents, I am a parent, and I know that you don't really know what you're doing. No parent, I think, does when you're going into this thing. You just
You're
kind of
winging it.
you're winging it 90% of the
Yeah.
time. And what works with one child, you assume is just going to work with the next child.
Right.
And you're so caught up and you're so busy and you're so doing stuff. And then, to really be thoughtful and mindful and take the time for a book like this to really look at each individual child very individually, I think is a really important thing. And that's what I love about your book, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That is really at the heart of it.
Yeah, because it is.
feel
It's just like you just kind of be like, okay, that worked for that one, so it's going to work for this one.
No, and there's
but here's the
lessons to
playbook.
learn.
Here's a playbook for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get to some of the webinar questions we've got coming in.
Okay.
So this one's one that I wasn't sure if you were going to get to it, but I don't think you touched on a little bit, Maressa, that April was, I think you said one of your editors, or and so
She did a technical edit. So
technical
like
edit.
mhm.
So Laura wants to know, how did you two connect? And this is a wonderful pairing and it's magical. So how did you two connect?
No. Was it, I chose a wedding date for you, but was that the first? How did you find me?
My father, again, my dad, the astrologer. A lot of origin stories come back to Stu Brown.
Yeah.
He found you through Facebook or something like that, April, and he said, hey, you should check her out. Her writing is beautiful, and she's an amazing astrologer and a wonderful writer, aka somebody you might aspire to be like one day.
Oh, stop. Oh gosh, yeah. That's so sweet. But I mean,
you guys have some similar astrology, so no wonder he was like, oh, she's great.
Yeah, we like a lot of the same little techniques and stuff, your dad and I, and that is really sweet. I don't think I realized that. But it's hard to remember when we weren't connected, really. It's been a very long time.
Yeah, and so I followed you on Facebook and followed your writing and etc. And then was looking for a wedding date back when I beta marriage.
Yeah. And that was my specialty at the time. I don't do it anymore. Please don't ask. But I started to fantasize about choosing dates for divorce instead. I knew I'd been at it too long at that point, but that's right. Yeah. So we chose that date for your wedding. And did we do, both your weddings?
Yeah.
We chose those dates. So yeah, but I think that we have a similar approach, to how we want astrology to be empowering and affirming and to be a tool for good and not
And
for just for-
pragmatic, like not
Yeah.
like we're talking sort of before this in the green room about my second book and sort of the aesthetic. And there's a point at which in the book process where you get some art and you get to weigh in. Is this reflective of my tone of what the book is going for? And I really, it's so important to me. Raising Baby, thankfully, really, really does reflect that for me. My tone, the pragmatic, warm voice that we were just talking about, and the lens through which we both really see astrology and want to bring astrology into the world. And so I want that for my second book as well. And and it's important to me for it to be a useful, down-to-earth tool for people, as opposed to this like very nebulous or intimidating or lots of numbers and
Right. Okay, we have another
Like-
question coming in. Okay, so Caitlin will let you know, now that your wonderful book is out, what has been the most rewarding moment for you with the book out in the world?
Good question.
Well, there have been many. It's hard to say just one. I think being able to interact with people in this capacity has been absolutely amazing, and so rewarding. There is one story that pops into my mind, kind of related to some of the things we've been talking about, that really just made me cry with happiness. I heard from somebody who picked up my book on a whim. They actually wrote this on their Instagram story. They picked it up on vacation at some little gift shop or something like that, brought it to the beach with them, and flipped to the page, to start reading about their child, who it sounds like they were maybe having a little bit of some headbutting with or some challenges with. And she said that as soon as she started reading that page, she started to cry. She felt like validated.
Oh, and look at you.
Yeah.
It's contagious.
But it meant something. It meant so much. And
Yeah,
that's,
'cause it's
even just one person
Yeah.
having that is all that it takes for you to realize that it's like, this is why I wrote this book.
And I don't know if you feel this way, Maressa, but I always feel like when I'm writing anything, it's like I'm writing to one person. And sometimes you can even visualize what that person's like or what they need or whatever it is. Did you find that as well when you were writing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually thought about, if I was writing Scorpio parent or I was writing Libra baby, I was thinking about people in my life who have those placements and thinking, how do I see them? How do they want to be seen? What would help them feel seen? and like they had space held for them for who they are. So yeah.
Okay. So I think you mentioned this, but because you kind of talked about grandparent connections. So, but this book, the question's coming in, can this book help grandparents too? And I'm thinking that the answer is yes.
Yes. I even say in the book description and the opening intro part of the book that this book is for everyone. It's for grandparents, it's for caregivers, it's for proud aunties and uncles and anybody who has a little one in their life or was a little one at some point.
So that leads to the next question from Kyle, which is, what do you want people to take away from your book when they read it? So it's kind of, it can be for everybody, but what do you want them to pull out of it?
I want them to feel like we were just talking about, feel seen, feel like validated, understood, and that they have what they need, a little bit more of what they need in their parenting toolbox or their life toolbox to offer that to someone else who they love.
What?
Nice.
This is a personal question from Laura, but it's also for me too, because my little grandbabies are twins. So how do parents deal with twins? She has twins 1 minute older. Do we treat them the same? Do we treat them different?
Go ahead, April. I'm so curious to hear what you think
about it. It
about
can be so different. I've had
Mhm.
twins, we've had
Oh,
twins in our
But
family.
you're
Yeah.
saying something that there's like the opposite side. Oh, that actually was like Rachel Lang had mentioned that, but I'm curious. She was saying that it's like she thinks that one of them takes the other side of the axis.
Yes.
So you got a Libra, the other one acts like an Aries.
Yes. That is what we've seen in our family, is to differentiate themselves. You could take either of those little individuals and see that sign, like the sun sign in each of them, but they're expressing it from the polar opposite point of view. The other thing that can be different, Maressa talked about the difference just a little timing can make too between the birth of babies. It can be their ascendant.
Degrees. Yeah.
Yeah. It can, as little as 4 minutes can make a difference.
Yeah. Okay, this is from Caitlin, and it's not really a question, she says, it's just a statement. But her daughters are 9 and 6, and she wished you'd written this book when they were born. Today, reading Raising Baby, she's learning so much about my little crab and fish and am able to understand them even more. And this book has been incredibly helpful to her and her husband in raising their daughters. So
yay.
The world to me.
That was a great little statement to end on, because that's about the time we have, and the questions coming in. So
let's go for another hour.
I think we could. I mean, trust me, I could be diving into who I am, and
you can do all of that with this book.
Myself?
I mean, it's super helpful book for the whole family. Leave it out on your coffee table, because most astrologers I've spoken to, it was a journey that began with a single book they found on somebody's coffee table. Linda Goodman or whatever. Make it this one. This is a really good one.
And Emmy, real quick, was asking about what she's writing next. It's the next book she's coming out next July is when her next one's coming out. Can't really say too much about it right now.
But it is astrology, I can say that, and it is for a general, wider audience.
Perfect. April, where should people, if they want to connect with you or follow you or know what you're doing next, where should they follow you at?
Oh, my website is called bigskyAstrology.com. I've been running that sucker since 2000. So it's got a lot of stuff on there. I have a weekly podcast called the Big Sky Astrology Podcast. Comes out every Monday and tells you about the week's pertinent astrological news. I think those are probably the best places. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram.
Okay, what's your, are you just April Elliott Kent? Is that what you're?
No, it's Big Sky Astrology on Facebook, and on Instagram, it's Big Sky Astrology April.
Okay, perfect. All right, that lets people know. And Maressa, how about you? How would you like people to connect with you? Are you on Instagram and all that?
Yes, I'm on Instagram, Maressa.Brown, and you can find my website, maressabrown.com. Those are the two main spots.
Excellent. Well, this has been enlightening and so fun, and just like it's just as insightful. I just love it. So it's been really fun having both of you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah,
fun for us as well. Yeah,
excellent. Well, hopefully we'll see you. Maybe we could see you in person down at Warwick's in July of next year. I think that might be a fun thing.
Great.
Might be a fun thing to do. All right.
All right.
And when we close out here, unfortunately, we're not going to see you guys because I closed everything out. So it was really nice having both of you.
Lovely to meet you, Julie. Thank you.
You as well,
my dear.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.